Dit is Ergens Over Radio.
Een andere kijk op de wereld.
Hi, this is Kerry Cassidy from Project CAMELOT, Whistleblower Radio, and I'm going to be playing a clip here to introduce our guest, Jay Weidner. One moment, please, and let's see how this works.
Jay Weidner reveals the ultimate meaning underlying the resurrection resurrection of Christ, the message of the book of Revelation, the vision of Ezekiel, and the Kabbalistic concept of the restoration of the world. While ancient lore tells us that the purpose of alchemy is to change lead into gold, this is only a metaphor for something far more important. The real point of the perennial tradition is to take the lead of the human body and convert it to the golden luminescence of the spirit, of the soul. The photons that exist inside our very DNA may be the driving force behind the alteration of our genetic structure.
Okay, this is Kerry Cassidy, Project CAMELOT, and we have Jay Weidner with us. Hopefully that clip was able to be heard over there. And I want to say that he is called by Wired Magazine an authority on hermetic and alchemical traditions. He's a conspiracy hunter. They call him erudite, and also a modern-day Indiana Jones. Jay Weidner, I think you're well known enough where we don't even need this introduction, but I thought I would do that just for fun. Are you there?
I am. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great.
So basically, I think that you do have a very interesting body of work here, and I would love it if you would tell me where you're at now, because I think a lot of this research that you did has been in the past.
It has indeed. I've gotten into some, I guess what you call finally into the UFO field. I've been skirting the edges for 20, 25 years and haven't really wanted to get into the UFO thing too much because there were so many other people doing it. But time is running short, and so this year, 2010, I decided that I would just come out and start telling what I knew about it, and so that's where I'm at right now. I'm trying to get out a lot of esoteric information that relates to the people or the beings that control us and control our planet, and I'm trying to get it out quickly because I'm a little bit afraid that this great window of opportunity that we've had over the last few years with the internet and the sudden explosion of information, which has just been wonderful, is going to close. And just a feeling I have, these periods of openness in history are usually very brief, and they're followed by usually a rampant kind of dictatorship. And, you can go to Elizabethan England, and, when Queen Elizabeth I was on the throne, and there was a sudden explosion of openness with poetry and Shakespeare and new ways of looking at religion, and alchemy came into vogue, and then it was shut down by James I soon after Elizabeth died, and so I don't know if it's going to come to a close, but I have a sneaking feeling that this window is, and so I want to get out all the information I can before that happens. And so I'm on a quest right now to tell everyone what I know about what's going on in this field. And I've been working with, of course, Richard Hoagland for 20 years. I was there early on in his Moon and Mars research and traveled all over the world with him looking at stuff. But I stayed out of it because I was really only interested in the alchemical aspects of all of this. But the alchemy and the study of alchemy has led me inexorably towards trying to figure out, the bigger picture of what is going on and who is who and what is what. And in the end, I've come to some rather damning conclusions about the whole thing, and that's where I am right now. Hopefully I can get into some of that today.
Okay, great. Yeah, that would be fabulous. I see that you also have a sequel called Time Wave 2013, and I'd like to talk about that documentary that you're working on. Or I don't know, is it done at this point?
Yeah, it's done. Time Wave 2013 is out. The last film that I had that just came out is called Infinity: The Ultimate Trip, which is about life after death, which is a subversive attempt to get people to realize that there's nothing to fear, and then the controllers can't control us, which is really one of my goals right now, is to get the human race out from under the slavery and the attitude of slavery that we've been under for millennium. And
right.
That's really my main goal right now, is to make the human race realize that we've really been mental slaves, and it's time for us to get off our knees and start acting like people.
Or like humans. Well, yes, absolutely. And as actually Ashiana Dean would say, angelic humans. What is, because I don't know your philosophy in terms of Black projects and where you may sort of align with Richard Hoagland. Obviously, I've interviewed him and known Richard for a while now as well, and I know some of his opinions. I know some of his background, and I think a lot of what he knows is even not out there. However,
right.
I'm wondering, are you completely aligned with him in your philosophies? Do you guys agree on most things? Do you diverge in any particular areas within, regarding what we call the big picture?
Well, I think actually Richard and I have been in very many heated discussions. I wouldn't be the only person to be in a heated discussion with Richard Hoagland. But where I diverted early on with him was he was pursuing the alien thing and thought that all of the things that we were seeing on Mars and the moon and the very odd stuff that's going on around Saturn was the extraterrestrial aliens, and I never bought that line, and so that was always our big point of disagreement. I admit that I was mistaken. I thought early on that this was all U.S. military and using the alien story as a cover-up, but I've since now, after reading the Indian Purana texts, which are the ancient texts out of India, and studying them now for a couple of years, I've come to the conclusion that there is an extraterrestrial thing going on, but that they are human. They're not human, not exactly human like we are, but they're of human stock. And
do you recognize them as being the Anunnaki? Would that be terminology which along the lines of what Sitchin writes?
Well, I do. I have many disagreements with Sitchin, but yeah, they're the Anunnaki, the Nephilim, but the Archons. But what they really are is they're the Aryans, and Aryan, of course, means people from Mars, because Aries is Mars in Greek, and the Purana texts from India are quite open on this subject and say that every 60,000 years. Let me put it to you this way. Every 12,000 years, there's a gigantic coronal mass ejection coming from the sun. We had one 13,000 years ago. We know it. We had one 26,000 years, on and on. But every 5 of these, so every 60,000 years, we get the mother of all CMEs. And that is this coronal mass ejection, which comes every 60,000 years, is so huge and so deadly that it literally wipes almost all life off the planet, and it all starts up again. And the Puranas are quite clear.
Getting this out of which text in India? Which Indian text?
They're called the Puranas. The Puranas are actually not. They're not considered a good text by the scholars because they're just so wild and fantastic and unbelievable. But I decided when I read the Puranas, and they're long and it's an arduous duty to have to even read them. I decided when I started studying them that I was going to take them literally and see where I went with my thoughts. And as I read them and took them literally, what I realized what they were saying is that 2 or 3 huge coronal mass ejections ago, or 240,000 years ago, a group of humans decided that they didn't want to die in the gigantic coronal mass ejections, these huge fireballs coming out of the sun, and they built ships. They called them arcs, and they moved off planet. And this is in these texts. And they went to a place that the Puranas call Mahar, which is very close to Mars in the way it's pronounced. And they came back after the Earth had healed itself, and they brought back all the genetic stuff and all the plants and the animals, and they restarted life here on Earth. And they are our masters, and they've been living parallel with us for the last 60,000 years, and about 6,000 years ago, they kind of came out of hiding and started civilization. This is what the Puranas say. Now, I wondered why they would suddenly come out of hiding and begin civilization, and when I began looking into that, I realized from my work in alchemy and the cross of Henday that the big coronal mass ejection was coming soon. And then I put two and two together, and I realized that probably most of everything that's been going on for the last 6,000 years, but especially the last 70 or 80 years, is a mass evacuation by the Aryans back to Mars. And if you look at Joseph Skipper's work, I don't know if you're familiar with his work on the Hale crater, but if you Google in Hale, H-A-L-E, Hale Crater Civilization, you can see their colony up on Mars. And Joseph was given that picture from an unknown source inside the European Space Agency, and there's farms, and there's roads, and there's buildings, and we know from Hoagland's work that Mars does not have a red sky. It actually has a blue sky, that NASA is actually purposefully coloring the sky to make it look red. Yes. We know that there's all sorts of crazy stuff all over the planet, including forests and rivers and lakes and everything about Mars that we've been told, it isn't true. And so this is a massive cover-up of gigantic proportions, and they're using kind of the alien story as a cover to hide their activities, which I call Project Good, and Good stands for Get Out of Dodge. And so they're getting out of Dodge right now. They're leaving. In fact, they may have already left. I don't know. So that's really my take.
Okay, now, are you aware of the whistleblower testimony that we have?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, so you will know that our whistleblowers would concur that, there's definitely civilization and colony on Mars and underground bases there and so on.
Yep.
So this information, it would not be new to us, but it is new coming from the texts in India. And that's fascinating that you sort of followed that trail and got to where you are by doing so. Now, it is true. I mean, certainly the texts in India have been talking about basically UFOs, Vimanas, and so on for a long time, and people are very aware of it. It's in the literature, so to speak, in the consensus reality. But where you're going with this is interesting in that you're really focusing on Mars, and you're focusing on a particular group that came from Mars. Now, are you aware of the work of Michael Tellinger at all?
I am. I'm not. I've scanned it. I'm not completely familiar as much as I'd like to be. So, okay. What is he saying?
Well, it's just that I just interviewed him recently, and we had also interviewed him in the summer. He's talking about South Africa, these standing stones and ruins that cover, miles and miles that basically indicate the Anunnaki civilization that Sitchin talks about, where man was possibly originally genetically engineered by the Anunnaki.
Yeah, I am familiar with that. Yeah, that's fascinating work.
Yes.
I agree that could probably be true. We were definitely, engineered by these guys, and they're seriously advanced. I mean, they may not even die, actually.
Right.
from what I've been able to find out. And all the things that we've heard over the years, all the fantastic things about there being an elixir of life and being able to remote view and travel across the universe. These guys do this every day. I mean, this is nothing to them. We are their slaves, and we've been their slaves for thousands of years. And they have abandoned ship because they're afraid of what's going on with the sun, as well they should be, and we all should be. And they have these underground bases on Mars because Mars does not have a magnetic field or tectonic plates. It's not going to suffer the crustal torque or the magnetic storms or any of the things that we're going to suffer when this happens. And I actually believe, by the way, that all the things that we're seeing right now, the volcanoes, the strange earthquakes, the oil pipes that are breaking, the gas clouds that are forming, this is all part of this thing that's going on, this coronal mass ejection building up on the sun is causing a commensurate electromagnetic flux here on Earth, because they're intimately related, the sun and the Earth, and we're getting all sorts of resultant crustal torques and volcanoes. And if I was the powers that be, I'd pull up all of the oil drilling pipelines out of the ocean right now, because there's 700 of them in the Gulf alone, and they're going to all start breaking, I'm afraid.
Okay, well, actually, that is interesting the way you're framing it. I have to say that are you aware of the weather wars portion of what's going on as well? Because some of these events that we are experiencing are being purposely moved along and escalated by the powers that be, and I'm wondering if you looked at that side of it.
I have. In fact, what's going on is that the powers that be that are here are not the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki have left, but they've left behind managers. We'll call them managers.
Yes.
The Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, all these guys are their managers. And the managers don't like us. And they think that they're trying to get rid of us, is what they're trying to do. It's a gigantic depopulation effort going on, and it's working. And so they're trying to trim down the population to some reasonable size and hope that they can go into their underground shelters at Denver Airport and all over and avoid the coronal mass ejection damage and come out later. But the more I look at all of this, the more I think that they've just been fooled by the Anunnaki, and that if even they do go underground, all the oxygen is just going to be sucked up off the Earth by the coronal mass ejection. They're going to suffocate in there unless they got 100 years supply of oxygen, which seems rather doubtful. So I don't know if our managers are the smartest people on Earth, but I do know that they are absolutely treacherous, and they will do anything, and they are manipulating the weather. I live in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm telling you, it is winter right now, and it has been winter, and it hasn't stopped. It is freezing cold. It's snowing. It's raining, and it's because they're messing with the weather that's causing resultant low pressure systems to form, and could even be bringing on a mini ice age. So, these things are all combined together.
My evidence is that part of the spill that was engineered, I have a whistleblower testimony telling me that the gaskets, whatever you call them, were known to be weak and that they were supposed to fail. But that there is also a volcano under there that is erupting, and that there is, that oil is supposed to move up the coast, the Atlantic coast, over to Iceland and down the European coast, and that's part of their population, depopulation plans. And so in other words, they're using some of these events to actually steer them in certain ways and to escalate things, also to stimulate some of the things to happen sooner and to happen in certain areas of the world where they want to see this depopulation happen faster. Let's put it that way.
Well, it's very, very interesting to talk to somebody who actually knows these things. Usually I'm talking to people and I have to like go over everything 100 times before they get it. So this is great. So I don't even need to go into all of this stuff because you guys already know it. So that's fabulous. Yes, I would absolutely agree. The way I've been watching this oil event unfold, and at first I was just angry that they weren't stopping it, and I was attacking Obama and everything. But now I actually am convinced that what you just said is right. I think they're just letting it happen. I'm not even sure if the oil that they're showing us on the video is actually where it's coming out of. There was Simmons, who was the oil guy for Bush, said on Dylan Radigan's show 2 days ago that there's another volcano erupting 5 miles away that they're not telling us about. And we know that they changed the crew on the platform about 2 hours before the eruption. A whole bunch of new guys that nobody knew came in, and we know that Obama sent a SWAT team there. So what was the SWAT team about? Well, the SWAT team, I think, was there to make sure that nobody got in with video cameras, no reporters got in, so that they could control the whole thing, the whole story. And I mean, it's freaky, and anybody, right now, these guys should be all put in jail. That's what I think.
Well, sure. If that was gonna do any good, which I'm a skeptic about the use of so-called jail here on planet Earth, since the whole place is more or less a prison. But that's not really a cure for anything, in my opinion. But at any rate.
Okay, well then I got a better solution, but I won't say it.
But as a screenwriter, you, and having been, making documentaries and so on, you will be familiar with the notion of foreshadowing, and you probably heard that the movie Knowing had this incident in it. I'm sure you heard Nicolas Cage.
Well, actually, believe it or not, Knowing is based on my work.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
My book, The Cross of Henday. Yeah.
No. So anyway, I'm just alluding to the fact that they are foreshadowing a lot of these events in various places and have been for quite some time. But it's also, because this is an area where you will also have gone, which is how the field of consciousness, and that means us, that means all of us, will impact on events that they do plan. In other words, we're not just slaves here, because we're actually, if anything, the slaves are beginning to rebel and take over the planet. And I think that is the thing that is scaring these people the worst of anything. And therefore, what we have is we do have a battle, but it's a spiritual battle. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, I completely agree with that. Ron Paul was on the radio yesterday and said that he's gotten word that everybody in the Federal Reserve is freaking out because it looks like America is finally waking up, and they're afraid they're going to get, we're going to come after them, which I hope we do. But that's what this really is, and this is the religions that the Anunnaki have formed and placed around us like prison walls. Are falling apart, and those religions, I'm sorry to say, I'm not trying to offend any religion, but those religions are just manufactured to keep us in slavery and keep us from knowing who we really are. And who we really are is astonishing. It's the most astonishing story there is. I mean, we are the paragon of creation. We are the possessors of hyperdimensional bodies, and we can do anything. The great anthropologist Robert Lawler, who's a dear friend of mine, was really the first white guy to ever get into Australian Aboriginal culture, and he lived with them and traveled with them and went on walkabouts and wrote a great book about it. But he tells astonishing stories of psychic abilities among these Aborigines to talk to each other over hundreds of miles. They know where the game is 3 or 4 days before the game even moves into the areas where they're going to hunt them. They know where the salmon is going to be, days before the salmon shows up at that place, so they're there to get it. And so what he's showing is that our original primal selves, which are represented by the Aborigines, have incredible abilities that have all atrophied for us because of technology and all the rest, and that we are incredible beings who are eternal and infinite, and we can do anything. This is what the Anunnaki do not want us to find out. This is their number one goal. Fear. Keep everybody locked in fear so they can never relax long enough to find out who they really are, how powerful they are, and how we can knock these guys out in a split second if we collectively decide to do so.
Right. But have you, there's lots of places to go with all of that. And certainly as what we say is that the biggest secret, that is the biggest secret. In other words, our own power is the biggest secret that they don't want us to know. I have to say, however, that humanity is waking up. And what you're talking about is a precog, abilities that have to do with being precogs. And I'm wondering if you're aware of autism, the role of autism, and the fact that there are lots of autistic children more than ever before being born, and that this is actually being engineered by the black projects with a purpose in mind. Are you aware of that?
Well, are you talking about the vaccines that cause autism?
Yes.
They have. So you're saying that the black ops people are creating autism to keep us stupefied?
No, actually what they're doing, what they have been doing is certainly trying to create a race of precogs such that they can use them. Because what they do is create, that's one aspect. There's another aspect to it that has to do with a jump in the evolutionary timeline for humanity, has to do with that gene, apparently. And, I just have some preliminary research in this regard, but I was just curious whether you had gone down that path at all, because it does factor in to where that, because they're always trying to create a Superman, as you may know. And so what we're really talking about is a creation of humanity 2.0. And so in a sense, you could say, because with autism obviously comes a lot of problems with children. So they have this gene, they have these abilities, but at the same time, they have other genes and other problems. So it's not a perfect solution, but it's one of the aspects and one of the ways that they've been going about trying to upgrade the human race from behind the scenes. But in a sense, you could look at autistic children as being the sacrifice to do so. What it does is change the gene pool, and it changes it. It's kind of, if you look at a flat line on a graph, then you see a jump. That's what the autistic gene does. And if it enters into enough people in the population, there's an effect that happens. This is a whole sort of secret area that I've been putting together. I was just curious whether you had gone down that road at all.
No, it sounds incredibly fascinating, and I would be very interested in that work. I had no idea, but it doesn't surprise me. However, I can't believe that anything that these guys do can be of a benefit to humanity. That just goes against every single thing that I've ever read or heard about them. They seem to be some of the most nefarious people, or whatever they are.
Well, you have to remember that they are interested in keeping the race alive. In other words, they want to keep themselves alive. They want to keep, a race of certain group of them alive. So it's very selective. But, you can look at it from that point of view. They will, in essence, it's still the Nazi agenda for all intents and purposes.
Yes, it is. Anytime you're messing with things like that, you're definitely, you're opening Pandora's box, and who knows what's going to come out of there. But, the real point of everything is that we are already born very born with angelic powers and abilities, and we are just taught that we're nothing but lumps of clay that breathes and walks, and we need to change that whole paradigm quickly because. And it is happening. People are getting more psychic. That's actually what one of the points of Time Wave 2013 is about, how we're getting more psychic and synchronicities are increasing. I don't know if they are for you, but I'm getting 5 or 6 synchronicities a day now. And if a synchronicity is happening to you, you better wake up and pay attention because somebody's trying to tell you something. And so a lot of people aren't even aware enough to know that they're having a synchronicity.
Yes, absolutely. Now, I'm noticing that you also, in a sense, you are talking about the evacuation of the planet, and that was interesting. Actually, that's one of the major reasons I invited you on the show. I have a friend who has read a lot of your work and looked at a lot of your work, and she encouraged me to invite you. I was not that familiar with your work, but I did hear that you were talking about the evac of the planet, and so that piqued my interest because I realized that you were getting some of the same information we were. And so, this is fascinating what's going on. Our evidence says that, first of all, one of our whistleblowers has spent a great deal of time with the Aborigines, by the way.
Really?
And that person is extremely psychic and able to communicate quite well. He's also interacting with these beings, these visitors. Some appear to have left. Some appear to still be here. But there are also other races here. I mean, other beings from other planets and other planetary systems. Do you acknowledge that?
There may be. At this point, the Anunnaki have pulled so many tricks on us that, using genetic recob to make different beings and robots and all sorts of crazy stuff to try to throw everybody off the track. That, I certainly can't deny that there's other races in the universe, but whether there's other races messing with us. At this point, I got to, just for the sake of Occam's razor, I've got to go with the fact that the Anunnaki are so advanced that they're just the ultimate trickster, the ultimate coyote, and they're just playing games with us all the time. So I don't know. However, I can't deny it, and I do have to wonder where the people from Tiamat, the exploded planet, where the asteroid belt is, where they went, if there were any survivors of that race. And so that would make it, the Aryans are from Mars, and then of course we have Earth peoples, and there may be the Tiamatians, I don't know what they call themselves, lurking around. That certainly seems to be what's going on with the strange stuff.
Okay. What about the reptilians and the Greys? Are you aware of them?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think the reptilians are the Aryans. And I think that the Greys are some kind of genetic creation of the Anunnaki for whatever reason, to gather up people's souls or to scare everybody. I don't exactly understand what the Greys are doing and what the abductions are about, but I certainly believe they're going on, and I'm not doubting that there are Greys.
What about the takeover of planet Earth? In other words, yes, there is an evac. What about the idea that there is a race of beings, first of all, that is not just the Anunnaki? In other words, that the reptilians themselves, there is a strain of reptilian. There's also, from what I understand, a combination reptilian Anunnaki, in other words, humanoid reptilian. In other words, there are many, many different races of beings. Now, I understand that you feel that the Anunnaki are tricksters, and certainly they are. All the beings out there, if you leave the 3D reality, then your powers of being, abilities to be a trickster, increase 100-fold, right? So
infinite, actually.
So just look at how nefarious humans are, and you can just extrapolate from there what other beings are capable of, whether or not they use the power, all the things they're capable of in deceiving us for service to self. Are you aware of that notion, the service to self versus service to others concept?
I am. My take on this is that, how do I say this? That we are not who we think we are, and the reptilians are certainly there, but we have the reptilian in us too, by the reptilian brain, and I know that the ritualistic aspects of our rulers would seem to indicate that there is a reptilian type of source there, because reptiles frankly love ritual, and they can't do anything without it. And that's one of the ways you can tell that you're dealing with the reptile, or at least the reptilian mind, is that they're just really into reptiles. If you've ever watched reptiles, you can see they go through a little dance every time they go hunting, and you know what I mean? You play the flute, and they'll rise up if they see the flute moving in a certain pattern. That's how they do the cobra dances in India. And so, yeah, I think there is a reptilian part, but also we have to realize that they may be trying to scare us from the serpent, because in fact the serpent, or the serpent power, is the key to our spiritual realization, and the Kundalini I'm talking about. And so I don't want to cast serpents or anything into a bad light, because there's a really good aspect to the whole serpent power thing, and I think we need to get that out, and so that when people's Kundalini is awakened, their psychic powers are awakened, they can actually see who's who and what's what. And I think that that's the number one secret that they don't want us to find out about, is our own innate ability.
And so I'm going to assume that you've spent time meditating, because I myself have joined the chakras and had many samadhi experiences, and I'm an advocate of doing so. So obviously you're aware of that. You're aware of that's why I played the clip in the beginning, because you're talking about the activation of the golden body, which is in essence the light body, and that takes you into interdimensional travel. As you say, you can see, it gives you second sight and all the powers that we actually have, sleeping powers, that the Kundalini is actually the way to activate all of those things.
That's right.
So in studying also the texts in India, you would have also come across that, right?
Oh yeah, well I've been a practitioner of yoga and deep tantric meditation for decades, and had several Kundalini awakenings in my life, and if you can get into a deep samadhi state, and what I call fall into matter, allow your spirit to fall deeper and deeper into the substance of the universe, is ether, if you will, you can actually attach onto the Akashic records, and you can begin seeing history. And I could guarantee you that if you do that, and I'm not the only one who's done it, so I've compared stories, there is definitely some kind of freakish reptile in our history who's been messing with us. And people who have taken ayahuasca have also reported meeting these dudes, and they are serious, and they're seriously scary. So, but they're easy to control, because again, their ritualistic nature makes them succumb to what I call asymmetrical war. So what the reptilian is trying to get you to do is to react in a ritualistic manner. So, somebody, it's sort of like, you're in a bar and somebody comes up to you and, starts pushing you around and calling you names. And of course, the reptilian mind says, I'm going to react, I'm going to bust him in the head or whatever. But that is what the reptiles expect from us. And what I think we need to do now is do everything in an asymmetric manner. Whatever it is that they want us to react to, we need to do the opposite. So they want us now to
taking
they want us now to right. They want us to rebel right now. They're making things so bad that we're going to take up arms and come and attack them. That's what they want.
Right.
We got to realize that's exactly what they want. So we don't want to do that. We want to sit very quietly and meditate right now.
That's exactly right.
And I'm afraid that they're so good at what they do, and we let our reptilian minds control us instead of letting the forebrain control us, which is really the divine brain. And we need to let that brain control us. And that's the brain that's awakened when the Kundalini wraps itself around the spine and goes up and ignites the light body, which is the secret of alchemy, the secret of our destiny. And it's really my favorite subject. The aliens and all of that is just kind of mundane when you get into the extra-temporal realms of samadhi and Kundalini awakening and alchemy, and this stuff is just really exciting, which is why I started reading the Puranas, by the way. Not for the history, but to find out, what they thought about these things. And what they say is that in the Golden Age, thousands of years ago, we were completed beings, and we've deteriorated down through the ages, and now here we are, in the Kali Yuga, in the Iron Age. The Iron Age also means Aryan Age, by the way. And they're evacuating, they're going into Mars, everyone's getting out of Dodge because they're afraid that the sun's going to explode. But you know what? The Puranas say that the sun doesn't do anything for 400 more years. So I'm thinking that we might have a great opportunity here, since they're all reacting in a reptilian fashion and leaving and freaking out and screaming and everything, and their managers are also reacting in a reptilian fashion by stealing everything, destroying the place, and thinking they're going to escape underground. They might all be wrong, and this might be like the biggest trickster trick of all time, in that we can gain back our destiny in the interval that they're all freaking out by reacting in an asymmetrical manner and taking back everything and actually beating these guys.
Well, there is that aspect, which is why I asked you if you acknowledge the notion of taking over the planet, because one of the plans that the reptilians are involved in, obviously, with the abductions and the genetic engineering that they're doing, is to create a hybrid race that will be able to occupy. In other words, they can better occupy, take over those bodies, and thereby, when the time is right, basically take control of the planet and turn it into what is in essence a Death Star, as they call it. Now, with that in mind, though, I have a couple questions coming at me. The way this radio station works is that people are in a chat room, and they can ask questions, type in their questions, or they can send them to our technician, Hans, who then relays them to me on the Skype. So I can read the questions and run them by you as we go here, just so that, because our audience is out there and there are listening. So if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you a couple of these questions, and in some ways you might have covered this ground already in a way, it seems to me, but one person is asking, how can the Aryans predict accurately when the next huge solar cycle will be? And apparently it's cyclical, and that's what you have talked about. But I think let's drill down a little more. In essence, I just heard you saying that you don't think it, or at least the Puranas are saying that it wasn't going to happen by their calculations for another 400 years. Is that something you stand by? Because I've also heard that you go along with Patrick Jarrell and people of that, and I guess Cliff High is now part of that sort of gang. Can you address that?
Sure. Yeah. In fact, I'm not used to having such a sophisticated audience, so you'll have to let me gasp here. But anyway, so let's just clear that whole thing up. The Puranas say that the Kali Yuga ends in 2442, okay? And that's exactly 666 years from 1776, which is the year the Illuminati was created and the United States was created. I posit to you that the United States was created solely as a mechanism to get out of Dodge. In other words, to create a technological society sophisticated enough to not help these guys, to be slave labor for these guys to build their big ships and to move many, many, many amounts of goods from the Earth to Mars, okay? 60,000 years worth of food and lumber and steel. Okay, now here's what happened, though, is that in the late 1890s, a French guy named Lafrenion, who was a Freemason, and Freemasons are part of the manager group, he went to Maya, Mexico, and the first guy to discover the long count calendar. And he saw the date, he wasn't counting the year that Jesus was born, so his miscalculation was 2011. Okay, we now know that you have to count another year in there, so it's not 2011, it's 2012, but he was close enough for government work. Anyway, he went back and he told his Freemasonic buddies that the Mayans said that the fifth sun, remember I said there's 5 suns in this 60,000 year period, one every 12,000 years, the fifth sun would end in 2011. And this is in 1894 or so, and they completely freaked out. And they immediately created Zionism in 1899. They created the first Zionist conference with Herzl. The kindergarten group met in 1901, which was Rhodes and Milner, and they began so what happened is that in 1776, they thought they had 666 years to go, so they started work. But in 1890, they found out that the Mayans, and Maya is a Sanskrit word, and the Puranas are Sanskrit, so there's a connection between the Mayans and the ancient people who wrote the Puranas. The Mayans were saying that it was going to go in 2011, and instead of taking a chance with the 2442 date, they decided that they'd get out of Dodge early just in case they were wrong. And the Puranas do say that there's a twilight period that happens about 450 years before the end, and that it's sort of just the dwindling down, the final dwindling down of the age takes about 450 years. So it could be argued that, I'm misinterpreting the Puranas and that they're really saying it's 2012, and that's the beginning of the twilight period in which a coronal mass ejection would certainly cause things to begin to dwindle down. And, So I hope that clears that up.
Yeah, well, okay, but what about the notion that at the moment what we're getting is a lot of information about the stargates. And I'm wondering if you're aware of the stargates, if you're aware of the portals, and that there is a war over the stargates here on this planet, and so on, because the stargates apparently are key to what in essence is the transformation of the planet and the evacuation, the positive evacuation of, in other words, through ascension, through personal ascension, possibly group ascension. And I don't know how you're feeling about that. But in essence, the stargates are the key. And I'm wondering if you have gotten and you're aware of the information about stargates.
Well, I'm not. I've heard from Hoagland and Wilcox and others about, the Stargate thing. But I think we have to understand something very important. You and I are both stargates, and the pineal gland is a stargate, and it allows you to pass in through any part of the universe that you want. You just have to know how to unfold your hyperdimensional body and slip it through into the eye of the Stargate. And so we are all Stargates. And so if somebody's manufacturing a Stargate, I'm saying, well, that's great, but it's redundant because we are already that. It would just be much easier for us to take up a spiritual discipline and learn how to use our own stargates. And
there's a link. In other words, there's a link up between the planetary or interdimensional stargates and our pineal gland, and so that I would say that's accurate. However, you still have to understand that there are physiological or hyperdimensional gates that even these beings, whether they be Anunnaki or other types of beings, have to honor. In other words, they're passageways in essence. Now, some are human, augmented by humans. This is information we've gotten from Dan Burish and from others. But there are also specific natural stargates here on Earth in which you're in linking with your pineal gland, in going internally. You're also going to follow, and this gets into the work of Ashiana Dean, and I don't know if you've followed that work or looked at it at all, but it's absolutely fascinating. The idea, just as there are grid lines in the Earth, there are passageways, and you will, even with your light body, be following these passageways through the universe.
Well, that's exactly right. That's what actually the Australian Aborigines walkabout was. There were pathways in between these hot spots where they could go, and Ayers Rock being one of them. And there's hot spots here all over the place. Yeah. So I mean, the hyperdimensional link to the three dimensions is sort of what I call orthogonal. In other words, it's at right angles to us. So we travel, across the earth in a straight line, walking around or driving or whatever. But the hyper universe is actually at a direct right angle to what we're doing, and it comes down through the pineal gland. And humans are the only animal that walks upright, and so we can attenuate our pineal gland directly into the slipstream of hyperdimensional energy that's coming down from outer space, actually, and use that to really do anything. I mean, I'm really trying to say is that it's possible for you, Kerry, to hold a bit of lead in your palm, go into a place that is a hot spot, go into a hyperdimensional place, come back and open up your palm, and the lead is gold. And I'm saying that this happens frequently, and that anything is possible. And that once we realize that,
ultimately we can we are creators. We are co-creators. That's the ultimate, objective of this game, if you will.
It is, and it's the ultimate objective of the people in charge to make sure we never find it out. Okay, so I use this analogy all the time. Jehovah is the chief prison warden, okay? And he tells Adam and Eve that they can eat of anything in the garden but the tree of knowledge, okay? So Eve, who's a typical woman, isn't going to listen to that. And so she wanders in, and there's a snake wrapped around the tree. And the snake says, Jehovah's a liar, You can eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and you will not die. He said you would die, but I guarantee you eat that and you won't die. And Eve said, really? And so she picked the apple, she took a bite, and she didn't die, proving once that Jehovah lied, that the snake is telling the truth. So what's the symbology here? The symbology is this. The tree of knowledge has apples. Apples are shaped like the hyperdimensional vortex. If you slice an apple at 19.5 degrees, you will see a pentagon of seeds, okay? Because life forms into a pentagon once it transmutes down from hyperdimensional to 3D. That's why animals and plants and humans are all shaped with 5 sides. And so we can understand what Jehovah is.
I'm sorry. It's just that you're also delineating the Luciferian precepts here. So I am. And you have to acknowledge that, because that is what the Illuminati live by. You've just laid it out very clearly and simply for the listeners. And I think that's important, because they need to understand that the Illuminati are following these basic truths that are embedded in our reality, but they're following them in a certain way. And so that the truths, it doesn't make the truth, it's like using, a tool. They use the tool. And the tool may be the pentagram, whatever. It's how it's used that matters.
That's right. The Illuminati inverts the pentagram and turns it upside down, which turns it into a goat's head. And so you can see that they invert. Yeah, they turn life into death. And they love to do that. They remember what their chief goal is to pervert this knowledge any way they can, so we can't figure it out. So what they're trying to do all the time, they take our sacred symbols and they invert them into horror, so that we will not look at all because we think we're looking into the face of the devil. And we may be looking into the face of the devil.
This is also a gatekeeping aspect, because the Illuminati are gatekeepers. And like any gatekeepers, they use horror to turn you away from the gate. But if you're not affected by the so-called horror, ultimately you go through the gate. They know this. It's just that they've worked very hard to construct the prison on the one side. But they themselves, this is interesting because we also have to deal with the fact that these are human beings, that they are going through the same processes that we are, and that they ultimately have a choice. And I'm a big fan of what is in essence happening here, which is the Illuminati defectors. At this time, we are having a changing of the guard, and it involves the rulers of the Anunnaki. And I'm wondering if you have also tapped into the notion of the return of the Anunnaki, and whether or not there are indeed two brothers who are at war with each other, and so on.
Well, that's our most ancient mythology is about Osiris and Set and their eternal war. And so, I do buy that. And I think we have to understand is that how to put this right. So there are, I'm going to try to explain this so that everyone gets it. There are etherions, as Paul LaViolette would call them, that are floating throughout the universe, and they are the packets or the quanta that they're talking about in quantum physics. They're the very base of all reality, all 3D reality, okay? And when, say, you block these etherions by putting a planet in front of yourself or whatever, you can temporarily block these etherions, and what happens is that your light body is no longer being sort of peppered by these quantum material, and you are liberated. So if you go into a place like the King's Chamber, in the pyramid, there are no magnetic fields in there. Your compass will point at you. And this was done to create a shield from the etherions so that the light body could more easily grow and get bigger. And so what's happening is that on December 21st, 2012, and actually every single December for like the last 20 years and for the 20 years beyond 2012, on the solstice, the sun is blocking the center of the galaxy, the major dynamo of these etherions, as Paul LaViolette has shown in his work. And so what's happening is that every December we wake up a little more, and it's been going on for 20 years. And because suddenly the confusing field of dominating etherions pouring out of the center of the galaxy is temporarily stopped, and we have kind of a mass moment of collective, right? And this is what's going on, and this is what they're really afraid of. They're afraid of the galactic alignment because they know that it stops temporarily the confusion that is going on, and when we get enough strength into our light body, we can repel anything in the universe, actually. And, there's gurus in India that were rumored to have light bodies that were hundreds of miles big. and that's why people went to live with gurus, because their light body was so big that just by being inside the light body parameter of this person, your light body would increase, because it was sheltering you from spiritual quanta, I guess you would call it. And so what's going on now is we're waking up.
Any enlightened being, or any being that, in other words, if your vibration is higher than the vibration of the people around you, what ultimately happens is you raise their vibrations just by...
That's exactly right, and that's what we need to do on a worldwide level. We need to work on creating a higher vibration, a larger light body, a big light body, a thick and strong light body, and then go out and interact with people. And you will notice, I'm sure you have noticed it, I know I have, you are changing people just by being around them. And, sure. and it's astonishing to watch it. And you can start controlling this universe. The secret is that, if you wish hard enough, you'll have an 80-bedroom house or all the drugs and sex that you want. It's like, oh my God, you're going to work on this incredible spiritual vehicle just to get a big house? Are you kidding? I mean, come on. So the secret is real. But the secret has been, again, perverted into being something that's just for material gain. But if you really want to be a powerful spiritual being, you have to start with that desire. And you will become that.
Okay, now we haven't gone to break at all for the past hour. We've been going nonstop. We do have another hour ahead of us, and I'm going to ask the engineer here if he wants to take a 4-minute break, which is what we usually do. And then, give people a chance to also, because I also like to try to send this out over Twitter, so we can also alert more people that we are here and we're talking about these really amazing things. So let's see if we can get some music, and then we will take a break. The music is going to be Ken Verheck. I'm sorry, I can't really pronounce this name. Reflection is the name of the song at any rate, and we'll be back in 4 minutes. This is Project Camelot, Kerry Cassidy.
Dit is Archons Radio.
Hi, this is Kerry Cassidy from Project CAMELOT, and we are on the air with Jay Weidner talking about the powers that be, the Illuminati, and the power within us all, and this prison planet and how there might be or actually very logically is, an evacuation of sorts going on at this moment that the Illuminati are a part of. I've actually gotten whistleblower testimony to this effect. They have been building large craft for a while now to take some of the Illuminati off planet. Some are being told that they can go into underground bases. There are different contingencies. I think that people have to understand that they never attack any problem from one direction. Obviously, if you have a Cray computer, you're gonna troubleshoot all the different angles of approach to any proposed action, and this is what they do. So that's only one aspect of it, and they also troubleshoot it using what we know of as looking glass. And if you look into the work of Dan Burish, you will see that there's quite a bit about that. But basically, they are using techniques to see the future, to see the most advantageous future. They also use what's called the yellow cube to do so. And they also use precogs. So this is all an ongoing process that they're involved in. And they're also shifting timelines when possible. And they're also aware that we have multidimensional reality going on. We've got a lot of simultaneous realities going on. So, Jay, are you still here?
I am.
Great. What I wanted to do is we've got a couple more questions that have come to the fore here, and so I will run those by you, and we'll go from here. And I've got more of my own as well. One person is asking if the solar cycle is coming. Why are the Earth Illuminati taking so much trouble to get the Earth centralized under money, a centralized monetary system?
That's a great question. So let's just like you just said, there's different groups. The one group is on the very inside, and they know all the hyperdimensional things, and they know that these coronal mass ejections are coming, when they're coming, how they're going to be, blah blah blah. They hired managers starting in around the time of 1750 to 1776, when they knew they had to really get going. They hired a bunch of managers, and one of them was Bauer, a banker named Bauer, who changed his name to Rothschild, which means red shield, because this is about the red planet. And so that's the second group, which is the managers. Now, the managers know that something is coming, and they know that it could be bad. So they've built these underground bunkers where they're going to go, okay? But they're not sure of anything, and they're not going to miss any bet, just like you just said. So they know that they have to centralize. Remember, they're centralizing for chaos. They're not centralizing for order. It's centralizing, they're creating chaos with it, so that when the you-know-what hits the spinning you-know-what, we're all going to be just fighting each other and killing each other and trying to grab what we can, instead of, doing the asymmetrical thing, which is to think outside the box and realize there's a spiritual problem. And so they're just not missing any bets. They're too smart to miss any bets. So they are centralizing. They are trying to create a one world order, just in case the Anunnaki might be wrong and they end up as the rulers of the world, which they are, but they don't want to have a world with 8 billion people on it. They want a world with 500 million, of which 400 million are their slaves. And so right. This is where they're going.
The Georgia Guidestones state this unequivocally. Mm-hmm. It's carved in stone.
That's right.
So it's fascinating how people that actually don't realize that the elimination of huge numbers of the population has been planned and is out there for everyone to see as their objective.
That's right. And they do that on purpose, by the way, because they have taken an oath that they have to tell everybody what's going on, okay? But the oath doesn't say how you have to tell them. This is what got me going. I discovered the Cross of Henday in 1986. I spent 24 years, wrote 2 books about it, and the Cross of Henday was built by an alchemist, and it describes the events leading up to the coronal mass ejection, the time it happens, everything. So we know that they're telling us this stuff. Same thing with Denver Airport.
You're one of those people, though, one of those rare people who have learned how to read the symbols and the symbolism.
I am.
I am.
It's one of my innate abilities. I have no idea how I got it, but I do have an incredible ability to see a symbol and unlock it like a zip file and watch tons and tons of information pour out of just a simple symbol. And it's amazing what you find. And when I first landed at the Denver airport in 1996 and walked around and I saw the murals there, I just about fell over, passed out, because I realized that it had to be Masons, or as the caretakers, who did this. And then I walked over and I found the Masonic plaque on the south side of the airport, in which the airport, it was said, was built by the New World Airport Commission. And there on those murals are all the scenes of exactly what you are talking about. Illumination, death, destruction, fear, a new race. All sorts of incredible things are locked into these murals. And you go all around the planet and you'll find more and more and more of it until you just reach the point where you realize that you can't be wrong. This has to be what it is.
Okay, now I also have another question here saying, what do they want to accomplish with the Large Hadron Collider, in your opinion?
Well, that's a good question. I presume that it's a time gate of some kind, just because it's really trying to create a black hole, which is the total gravity is at the center of your Stargate. So, when you reach the very, very center of your hyperdimensional field, and you're coming down in a toroidal, tetrahedron-shaped spiral, you eventually reach the point where the spiral gets so tight and so fast and so strong that it creates enough spin resonance that you can go hyperdimensional. And so there's no doubt that either they're complete idiots and they're just doing something because they thought it was a good idea, which I really highly doubt, or they're trying to create a time gate. So, but the thing is that they really don't need the hadron. They've got their torsion machines and physics and everything. So don't forget, there's also a bunch of people who are lagging behind the cutting edge and trying to catch up and find out what's going on. That's what NASA has become. NASA is not at the cutting edge, but they're sending probes out and they're doing, things going to Mars and things to find out where the cutting edge is. So they're completely oblivious to what's really going on. It's hilarious. But NASA used to be, before the early 1990s, it was the cutting edge. It was where they were advancing their technologies, how to build these torsion physics machines, these UFOs, and all the other stuff. But they got supplanted in the early 90s, and maybe they left planet. I don't know what happened. But the people that have been in since Bill Clinton was president have all just been running behind the curve, constantly trying to find out what's going on. So that tells me that there's a bunch of ignorant people there.
Well, I mean, as Richard Hoagland says many times, the lie is different at every level.
That's right.
NASA is part of that. In other words, it's a layer on the onion. It's one of the outer layers, unfortunately, and people don't realize that. So they're flying around in tin cans powered by, by fire.
Hilarious.
While the people that really know what's going on are using free energy and have been for 40 years or more.
Exactly. That's exactly right. I talked to one of them. I'm not going to say his name. He asked me never to say his name. I won't. But one of the guys who was a top guy at NASA during the Apollo, I talked to him in the early 90s. And he told me that they had developed high-powered trans-dimensional craft in the late 40s, and that they'd gone to Mars in 1959. They had bases all over the moon, and you know, and I didn't believe him at the time. I thought he must have lost his mind. And now I know, of course, he was being very sober and was telling me the truth. So
yeah, the thing is that the truth is far more complex and harder to believe.
That's for sure.
And science fiction is actually closer to the truth most of the times, as far as I can tell.
That's right, and you'll sound like a complete wacko maniac if you start telling people the truth. You're just like, oh, you poor man, you know, if you get the straitjacket. You know. Well, I've been disinvited from more parties than anybody, you know. I just start telling people the truth at a party, and Jay, you're freaking everybody out.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. But I am curious what it is that you think that you know, in other words, that hasn't gone out there already. I mean, I want to really get down to brass tacks here, because as you realize and as you see, you are talking to Project CAMELOT. I can tell by talking to you, you're not familiar with all of our stuff. And, you know, that's okay. It's understandable. We have over 100 hours of video and audio footage on our site. And we've been at this the way you've been at it, in other words, completely obsessively, going down the rabbit hole. But I have a feeling, I certainly know that Hoagland is keeping a lot of cards in his pocket. And that was obvious in my interview with him. And, you know, he's a delightful man. But I have to say, what is it that you know that insiders might have been telling you that you can tell us here, that you can share, that would be of interest?
Well, I can tell you one thing about Richard, anyway, is if you want to see something very interesting, and I think it accidentally slipped out because I asked Richard about it, and he seemed a little miffed that it was out. But I don't know if it's even up. He may have actually gotten it off. But go to YouTube and type in Richard Hoagland Saturn. I can't remember what town it is. I think it was in Leeds, in England. A lecture in Leeds, or just type in England or UK, because I can't remember the town suddenly for the moment. But anyway, there's about a 20-minute video on there that somebody took from the audience, maybe with a cell phone camera or something, of a lecture that he was giving there. And I don't know what got into him, but he just spilled the beans seriously in this lecture. And unfortunately, we can't see the other parts. No doubt if it's a Hoagland lecture, it was about 4 hours long, so there's only 20 minutes in there. So, you know, I don't know what else he got into, but basically what he's saying is a fascinating video, and it's the secret work that I've been working on and he's been working on for a long time, and that is the most astonishing thing of all, and that is that Saturn is a hyperdimensional machine. It's not a planet. And it was engineered, God knows when, millions of years ago by some race. Maybe it was us. The Puranas say that we came from Sirius millions of years ago and created life on Earth and on Mars and on Tiamat. So I think this great civilization that existed millions of years ago in our solar system, and our solar system is not just a bunch of rock going around, it is a harmonic system. The reason that there's life on the third, the fourth, and the fifth planets is because those are Pythagorean harmonics. And the whole system is a harmonic system. And the seventh planet, because don't forget the asteroid belt would have been the fifth. So Saturn would be the seventh planet. That is the end of the octave, okay, the very last note of the octave. And then the next note in an octave, the eighth note, is a harmonic octave up from the previous. I hope you guys understand what I'm saying. So
okay,
Saturn is the in-between. Pardon me?
It's the jump gate. In other words,
it is. And this is why Iapetus And see, you get into some of the dangest stuff here. I mean, I'm a big Kubrick file and have written, the articles on Stanley Kubrick. And in the book 2001: A Space Odyssey, the astronaut Bowman goes to Saturn, not Jupiter, like in the movie, and he goes to Iapetus to find the monolith, which is the Stargate. Okay, and we now know from Hoagland's work on Iapetus that is not a normal planet by any, or moon by any stretch of the imagination. And what it is the harmonic resonant tuning fork for Saturn. And Saturn, which is set, which is chronos, which is time, it's the chronometer of the inner planets. And when you slip through Saturn, you're slipping through the time gate, and you can go anywhere and you can do anything. And they know this. There's an incredible book which hardly anybody has read. It's probably $200 now on Amazon. Came out in the 70s by a NASA scientist called The Ringmakers of Saturn. And oh my God, it's an incredible book if you've seen it. And it talks about, they're building rings. There's gigantic vehicles that are orbiting Saturn. Iapetus is not a moon, it's a spaceship. And this is the remnants of this incredible civilization, and I believe that Earth people, I know that Earth people in the last 50 years, not Anunnaki, not anybody, but people from Earth have gone there, actually gone there. And so they're back engineering Phobos, which I don't know if you don't know about that part, but Phobos is one of their big ships from millions of years ago, and the European Space Agency released a jaw-dropping photo of Phobos a few months ago that Hoagland wrote a great article about, which shows the riving of the substructure. The infrastructure of the planet is actually a spaceship, and if they even got to Phobos, they could back-engineer everything they need, and they have. This is what's going on. There's a breakaway civilization.
The moon is also a spaceship in essence.
It is, actually. It's hollow, and they know it. I was told in 1991 that the moon has a gigantic set of two tetrahedrons in it, inside. And that's its power. And it may actually be the ship that we came here on from Sirius 30 million years ago or whatever. I mean, I don't know. My timelines at that point are screwy. I just know what I'm told, and I know what I see. And so, they blew up Tiamat in a war using hyperdimensional torsion weapons, and that threw the whole harmonics out of that whack in the solar system. And so now you have planets that are floating on their sides, and you have elliptical orbit planets, and you have they're no longer in harmony. And if we enlightened beings can get a hold of the power of Saturn, we can rearrange the solar system back into a harmonic pattern, and when that happens, you will really find out who we are. And until that happens, we're going to be living in chaos. And that's, again, what they don't want us to find out, because if you understand the power of torsion technology and hyperdimensional physics, you will figure out how to create harmonization again. And the powers that want us destroyed and want us to be slaves do not want us to find that out.
Okay.
So Saturn is the coolest thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I appreciate you talking about that. That's fascinating. And I have to say, and a nod here to John Lear, because I did an interview quite a while back with him in which he made a big deal over the Ringmakers of Saturn. And I guess he met the author, who, from what I understand, was an old man living here somewhere in California.
Yes, he is.
And I don't even know if he's still alive.
He is.
Fascinating
interview. He's in his late 80s, I do believe. I'm trying to interview him. But,
okay, yes. Well, let me know if you get a hold of him, because I will. Well. Okay, well, there are lots of avenues here to go down. In essence, though, just to bring things back here a little bit, because there are people out there that are kind of hyper over the whole situation, which some people are becoming, obviously. I don't know if you're noticing, but some people are actually losing it, and this is something that was predicted. Some people can't handle the pressure of the knowledge that is basically impacting us and the awakening that's happening. In other words, you cannot just awaken your chakras. You also have to balance yourself within this reality. And that's it's a tricky dance to be performing at this time under these circumstances. And where people are seeing, in the nuts and bolts, people are seeing they're losing their jobs, their bank accounts are going down, and so on and so forth. So they're having to change their entire paradigm, as is the larger planet having to do so. So what we have is a very fascinating cauldron operating here at this time. And I'm wondering if you bring things back just for a second, the information you're getting is that 2012, just for people to hear, is not necessarily when the coronal mass ejection is going to be happening. There are going to be a lot of events, but I'm wondering if you want to address initially, are you saying that you believe that there are 400 years to go, even possibly, or are you leaving that open?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm hoping that there are, and that we can use that as the moment to remake everything. I want to address also what you were just saying, which is about these people cracking up because there's too much knowledge and awakening. And that's why I created my video company, Sacred Mysteries. It is sacredmysteries.com. It's because we offer, exercises and conversations and how-tos and all sorts of videos for people to begin working on that aspect of themselves so they don't freak out, and then they are freaking out, and you need to do Tai Chi or yoga or meditate or walk in the woods or something every day, because if you don't, you're going to go crazy, no matter who you are. And so I encourage people to do that. I think we're at this point now where it's critical that we take responsibility for ourselves. We don't want any messiahs. This is another thing that I can't emphasize enough. We don't want aliens saving us. We don't want politicians saving us. We don't want spiritual people saving us. We have to save ourselves. And when that happens, then we finally take responsibility for who we are. Then we can crawl out of the muck, become the hyperdimensional light beings that we are. And another thing that's going on is, before the reason that the Indians have such reverence for the lotus is because the lotus grows best in a pile of dung, okay? And out of the dung grows the beautiful lotus. And out of the crap of this age, the horrid nightmare of oil spills and wars and everything, that pushes us into a crisis mode. And the human mind and the human spirit sometimes needs to be pushed and nudged along before they can consider alternatives. And so we are being pushed toward the place, whether by the Illuminati or the Anunnaki or just history itself, toward the place where we must now consider everything. And that is a great moment.
Yeah, and I think that's well said and very important. In other words, I would like people to understand the concept here, and I think that you will resonate with this. The idea is that as stargates in and of ourselves, we are vortexes, and where you get to the concentration or the alchemy of the human being is where the pressure becomes so great that it turns from iron to gold. And therefore, pressure that people are under, in other words, this cauldron is a magical cauldron. And what's going to come out of it is the spirit. is the purity of the spirit. And that's where you need to concentrate your energy. And now, all of this information that we talk about and that we go down these roads, knowledge, gain all knowledge is one of the ways that you begin to increase your vibration. It's just by knowing. And this is really crucial. In other words, information is not just information. Education and learning is not just that. It has a purpose behind it. What it is doing is expanding you. And so, and I know that you follow this, Jay, and I really appreciate you saying, I appreciate your work, and I appreciate the fact that you have talked about the alchemy of the spirit and that you tapped into that, because I do find it interesting that a lot of people don't understand. They'll talk the talk, but they don't really realize what they're saying.
No, and I can tell from what you're saying that you actually get it, which is rare these days. And so, once we realize that we are in a psychic web and we can communicate with anyone or anything, then suddenly the dynamo of history is altered. And again, this is what they don't want. And and this is why, by the way, the Illuminati is at war with all traditions. If you ever notice, every time the Illuminati take over a place, the first thing they do is destroy all the traditions in the place. Now, they aren't doing that because they hate tradition. What they're doing that is because usually wrapped inside a tradition, whether it be Sufism or the Aborigine of Australia or whatever, is the secret that you just enunciated. And they don't want that. That's why they burned all the Mayan books. That's why they want the Australian Aborigines to melt back into white society. That's why first thing they do is they bring missionaries in to, when they take over the country, so they can get rid of
destruction of the Library of Alexandria as well.
Exactly. They could not afford to have the light body knowledge, the alchemy knowledge. If you look in history, every time, the Gnostics were people who worshiped knowledge. And the Gnostics were the second biggest religion on earth 2,000 years ago. But you can take a religious history course in college and for 4 years, like I did, and not hear anything about the Gnostics. Even though 2,000 years ago, they were the second biggest religion on earth. So that got me interested in why no one wanted to talk about them. And when I discovered what the Gnostics believed, I realized that they knew that knowledge has a quanta. And the more knowledge you gain, the more of this mysterious Gnostic quanta you gain, and then pretty soon you begin superseding linear thought. And essentially, at the very end of this process, you're rendered speechless because there's nothing more to say. And I think that this is what they really don't want. And the reason that we don't know anything about the Gnostics is because there was a 500-year war against them in which every one of them were killed. And alchemy is the science of Gnosticism, and alchemists were always at the forefront of the first people to get murdered. These Gnostic sects.
Let's also talk about Rennes Chateau. I was just there, and fabulous energy place, by the way. And I'm sure you've been there as well. And talk about, in essence, what became like the witch burning of the Templars.
Yeah, the Templars and the witches weren't witches; they were the Gnostics who held the Gnostic belief system while the scourge of Rome, patterned itself over Europe and Asia. And so when the Europeans were the witches, were the people who kept the secrets, and that's why they were expunged and murdered. And same with the Templars, who are really kind of the warriors of the Gnostics. And they basically were saying, this is all BS. Everything that they're telling us is BS. And, that's the one thing you can't say. And so they called them witches because the Bible has a line in it about how you never suffer a witch to live. And so that gave them an excuse to kill anyone who was practicing Gnosticism. The Notre Dame Cathedral, on the island there in the Seine River, it was built on a temple of Isis. Chartres Cathedral was built on the temple of Isis. These Gnostic temples were all over Europe, and these people really liked their religion and didn't want what was coming. And the Christians masterfully reconstructed Christianity so that it emulated the Gnostic religion. In other words, Osiris became God, Horus became Jesus, Isis became Mary, and Satan became Set, and they continued on, and that's how they were able to conquer the spiritual landscape of Europe. But what was really going on underneath was there was just a hell of a lot of people who were going to have nothing to do with it, and they were continuing to practice their ancient Gnostic beliefs, their worship of knowledge, and
yes.
That is. I'm the number one propagator of a return to Gnostic belief systems, and I really encourage people to look into it and read about it.
What I'd also like to, we don't have a lot of time left, and I did want to ask you some specific questions about information that you may be getting. First of all, are you aware of the notion of the second sun or brown dwarf?
Oh, yeah.
And have you yourself been getting information in that regard?
No, I just read what the papers say. I know that I don't know. I haven't heard anything on the underground about it. I know that it exists, and that.
Okay. And what about Andy Lloyd's work? Are you familiar with Andy Lloyd?
Andrew Lloyd. Why does that ring a bell with me?
Well, he's got a website called Dark Star. He wrote a book called Dark Star about the brown dwarf.
Oh, no, I haven't read it, but yeah, I'm familiar with it. The nemesis are you talking about?
Well, that's one of the terminologies for it, but
right.
In essence, it's said to be on an orbit through our solar system, coming through our solar system at this time.
Oh, I see. You're talking about like Nibiru, that kind of.
It's not Nibiru. Well, it's not. It is a second sun. It's not Nibiru. There's conflict as to whether Nibiru might be a planet orbiting the second sun. But at any rate, the reason I'm raising this information to you is that I went to England and interviewed Andy Lloyd, and he spent 10 years investigating the brown dwarf idea. We had whistleblower testimony about the second sun quite a while ago. And on top of that, he was moved after he wrote his book and spent 10 years investigating that to investigate the Anunnaki. So there appears to be a connection between the brown dwarf coming through our solar system at this time and the Anunnaki that is sending him in a different direction. And I was just curious whether you were familiar with his work. I encourage you to go to his website and familiarize yourself with his work, because it will fall into some of the areas that you're obviously aware of already.
I definitely will.
I'm curious. You've got this documentary called Time Wave 2013. What exactly is the time wave? Are you talking about Paul Violette? Because we interviewed him as well. Are you talking about the wave that comes from time to time from what in essence is kind of like a volcanic eruption in the center of the galaxy, in the black hole?
No, not really. It's sort of, they all have to do, of course, with each other because they're all correspondent. But basically, I can describe time. And I've written an article on my website, The Alchemy of Time, or The Topology of Time, which has gotten more hits than anything I've ever written. And basically, just picture and you're probably familiar with this, but your listeners may not be. Just picture, in your mind an oval donut of energy floating in darkness. And so the energy comes down through the center, and it comes around the bottom, and it goes around the outside, and it comes back down through the top, and it does this infinitely. And this is a hyperdimensional state visually. And so what happens is that when the energy comes down through the North Pole or down through the top of your torus or your donut, it begins spinning in a tetrahedral. Imagine a tetrahedron without sharp edges. It's a vortex. So it begins coming down in a vortex, and as it approaches the center of your donut, the very center of it, the vortex begins spinning more faster and wilder and more concentric than a tighter spin until it reaches the very center where there is no spin at all, and then it goes into reverse and starts the bottom vortex, which goes all the way down to the bottom of the donut and then goes around and comes back down again. Well, this is what time is. When you're born, you come out of the bottom of your torus, and you spin down, and each moment is longer than the moment before. Each moment is longer and getting longer because the vortex is spreading out, and this happens all the way until it gets to the equator, and it starts its way up to the north, and now each circle is getting tighter. And this is the hardening of matter, or the hardening of time. And so when you're born, until you're 18, you're living half of your life, not in number of years, but in the way the vortex works. And after 18, you pass from your golden age into your silver age, where time starts speeding up. You pop through the top of the hole going down. Now you're in the bronze age of your life, which is after 36 years old, and you're spinning down, and then as you spin faster and faster, you enter the Iron Age. Notice that we're increasing in density here, and you're now, after 55 or so, you enter into that. Now every second is moving so fast that you can hardly believe it. You wake up and you can't believe that the years are passing by as fast as they are. And so we are right now almost at the very end of the vortex of our collective time. We're moving towards a time of no time, the end of time, which is why my book is called Alchemy at the End of Time. And in that moment of no time, we can reconstruct and become anything we want. And this is what's approaching us, and this is what they don't want you to find out.
Okay,
so
yeah.
I think
so in essence, what you're saying is you believe that 2012 is around that time when the decision time. What we've been given is apparently it's already starting to open, but there is an opening of the stargates, which is going to go from 2012, from what I understand, to around 2017, and possibly a little longer than that. At some point, they will close again, and this is a window of opportunity for all of us, and
that's why I said at the very beginning of this that the window, is going to shut soon, and I mean like around 2018, it's going to shut. And so now I encourage everyone to just start talking, talk to your friends, start passing out as much information as you can, because only in this window will it have the ultra effect that it can have. So that's why the information is pouring out. It's part of the topology of time. It's part of the way time works. And time has a substance. It has a feeling. It has a quality. And we are in the moment where, for sure, there's going to be many, many mistakes being made, because our reaction times are shortening as we get closer and closer to the end of time. That's why I encourage governments to just pull up all the drills, shut down their nuclear power plants. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like, we really don't need this right now. Right now, we need to start meditating and concentrating on what it is we want to be.
Well, you have to also remember is that that's why they're creating chaos and more chaos.
Yes, that's right.
Because they actually want to distract you from this power, this point of power that we will have, because our power will actually, it will never be that the opportunity that exists, at least here on planet Earth, some will even say possibly for all time, is opening, and that power, that point of power, personal power for the people here on this planet is during that period of time, so that if we were to act, if we were to recognize, in essence, our Godhead, we will take advantage of that it's going to be facilitated around us by everything around us. In other words, we are going to be helped at no other time. After that, we certainly have the choice of going through these experiences, but it becomes more difficult.
Well, very well said. There are a group, I call them the Light Masters. There's a group that's on this planet right now. I don't know where they live. Maybe they live near Rennes Chateau. I'm not sure. But the rumors is that they sit in meditation in a group, and they go out in their astral form and they look for seekers. And then they get inside the seeker's spirit and mind and begin influencing them. They drop books in their lap, and they make them turn a right turn when they didn't mean to, and when they saw a store and they went in and got something that they wanted you to have, or give you dreams. And Fulcanelli, who's my mentor and master, the anonymous man, he admits in his book Mystery of the Cathedral that he's one of these guys, and they've directed my life, and I have a sneaking feeling they're directing your life, and maybe everyone who's listening. So we have amazing help, and what they do is when they touch you, they give you the logos, which is the word, which is your ability to enunciate and articulate these incredibly complex spiritual dynamos and make them understandable to people. And this is also going to disappear after about 2018. So we only have a limited period of time to, for everyone to wake up. And I beg you, quit. If you're working 18 hours a day on your job, quit. Go do what you're supposed to be doing. Don't this is the time when you need to concentrate on this kind of thing and not worry about oil spills or wars or anything. That's all distraction to get you to not concentrate on what's about to happen. Alchemy is done also at the right time. So people, read Alchemy and they think, why is this guy doing the same experiment 150 days in a row, right? Well, the reason is because he isn't aware of when the right time is. So you're doing the lead to gold experiments over and over, hoping that he hits the right moment when time allows it to happen. That moment is coming. It's actually here right now.
In essence, you could say time is an element, and it's added to the mix, the cauldron in order to create what is in essence they call the great work, which is yourself, by the way.
It is.
But at any rate, what I would like to do here, though, is to go again to a little more of the pragmatic, in the sense that, because I've had people say to me, well, I hear that Jay is going to Peru, or that he thinks that Peru is a safe place, because you get a lot of people that are pursuing the very material side of this equation, which is what, in essence, the Illuminati are also doing. So within what is a spiritual quest, whether it be for power or for survival, a lot of people are concentrating on that notion, and that we are going to face, part of the tightening of the spirals, going through this particular vortex of time for the planet and for humanity, is the notion that there will be an increased pressure, not just psychologically or from man-made, but there will be earth changes that will wake up some of those people who have not been listening and will not be reached in any other way. So what is your feeling about this, and why are you going to Peru, and is safe places part of your sort of agenda?
It is. Unfortunately, since I published my book, Peru has shut down all the tunnels and has the military in front of the ones that are still open. So that alternative is being taken away from us. But the thing is that there's a curious relationship in caves, and we know that Peru is covered with caves, and the Andes are covered with caves, and that caves are round, and they're made out of heavily magnetic material usually. So when you are in a cave and you're meditating, your hyperdimensional field is really, really increased. So whereas I used to think that you went to a cave in Peru, as the Cross of Henday says, to escape the catastrophe, which you very, very well do, but also I have now discovered that, in fact, meditating in a cave somewhere is an extremely powerful meditation and really increases your spiritual and alchemical powers. And that may be the escape, the real escape that the Cross of Henday is telling us. So there's a mundane and then there's a non-mundane. So you take your pick. If you want to just go on living, then go hide in a cave and you'll come out to a world that's been completely destroyed. And I don't know what you're going to do then, except maybe eat canned food. But that won't last for long. So, I think we have to go to the outer edges of this thing, like all good shamans do, and realize that, no, actually the caves are there to assist us. I went through a book recently, a book that listed a lot of high weirdness, ghosts and alien sightings and UFOs and all sorts of stuff. It was one of these books that, like Frank Edwards used to write. And I was Googling. Every time I'd read the city where the thing took place, I would go to Google and I'd type in the name of the city and I'd put next to it caves. And I'd hit it, and every single time there was a high weirdness, there were caves around the place. And so I began realizing that these are natural time gates, and that apparitions and everything can come through them. Bigfoot and UFOs, and I've seen UFOs coming out of a cave, once. So, I don't know what to say.
Nice note, I have to say that we are winding down. We only have 3 minutes left. So I'd like to talk about something that people would be able to take away from here. What is it you would like to say that you haven't been able to already address in this conversation for the next few minutes, and also give your website again?
My website is jweidner, JAYWEIDNER.com. All my high weirdness articles are there. You can read my blog. And the company that I have is sacredmysteries.com, the best in spiritual films and videos. And if you really want to get a jump start on all this, it's a mystery school for the modern age. And you can watch the videos and you will be much further advanced, and if you're already advanced, then it'll help you along anyway and give you assurance that there's somebody out there at least trying. And basically, I think that people should take care of themselves and their families in a practical sense. In other words, get ready for anything on a real level. Grow food, get a community, put stuff away, whatever you can do. And this is where my DVDs come in, and then I think you need to take care of yourself on a spiritual level, which is, do something every day. Meditate, do Tai Chi, do yoga, pray, walk in the woods. I don't know what it is. I'm not here to tell you what it is. But do something every day that keeps you in the center of space, because things are going to get really, really weird here. And I keep listening to shows like this. And that's all I can say.
Okay. Well, Jay, thank you, Jay Weidner, for coming on the show with me. This is Kerry Cassidy from Project CAMELOT, Whistleblower Radio. And let's see, thank you. And we've got John Waterman following my show. So I encourage everyone to listen. John Waterman has always got something fabulously interesting that he's talking about. So that would be a great thing to do. And thank you very much.
Dit is Archons Radio. Dit is Archons Radio.
door, stretched out and purring, waiting for more. Strange shade of stone, deep cat-eye green, no way to escape, no one hears my scream. He's come here so often, just when I'm alone, I can't help the longing I'll feel when he moans. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jaguar. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jaguar. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jaguar. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jaguar. There is a jaguar outside my door, stretched out and purring, waiting for more. Strange shade of stone, deep cat-eye green, no way to escape, no one hears my scream. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jaguar. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jaguar. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jaguar. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jaguar. He's come here so often, just when I'm alone, I can't help the longing I'll feel when he moans. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jaguar. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jaguar. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jaguar. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jaguar. There is a jaguar outside my door, stretched out and purring, waiting for more. Strange shade of stone, deep cat-eye green, no way to escape, no one hears my scream. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jaguar. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jaguar. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jaguar. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jaguar. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jaguar. He's a jag, he's a jag, he's a jaguar. Strange shade of stone, deep cat-eye green, no way to escape, no one hears my scream.
With Sitchin. But yeah, they're the Anunnaki, the Nephilim, but we have the Archons. But what they really are is they're the Aryans. And Aryan, of course, means people from Mars, because Aries is Mars in Greek. And the Purana texts from India are quite open on this subject and say that every 60,000 years, let me put it to you this way, every 12,000 years, there's a gigantic coronal mass ejection coming from the sun. We had one 13,000 years ago, we know it. We had one 26,000 years, on and on. But every 5 of these, so every 60,000 years, we get the mother of all CMEs. And that is, this coronal mass ejection, which comes every 60,000 years, is so huge and so deadly that it literally wipes almost all life off the planet, and it all starts up again. And the Puranas are quite clear.
Getting this out of which text in India? Which Indian text?
They're called the Puranas. The Puranas are actually not they're not considered a good text by the scholars because they're just so wild and fantastic and unbelievable. But I decided when I read the Puranas, and they're long and it's an arduous duty to have to even read them. I decided when I started studying them that I was going to take them literally and see where I went with my thoughts. And as I read them and took them literally, what I realized what they were saying is that 2 or 3 huge coronal mass ejections ago, or 240,000 years ago, a group of humans decided that they didn't want to die in the gigantic coronal mass ejections, these huge fireballs coming out of the sun, and they built ships. They called them arcs, and they moved off planet. And this is in these texts. And they went to a place that the Puranas call Mahar, which is very close to Mars in the way it's pronounced. And they came back after the Earth had healed itself, and they brought back all the genetic stuff and all the plants and the animals, and they restarted life here on Earth. And they are our masters, and they've been living parallel with us for the last 60,000 years, and about 6,000 years ago, they kind of came out of hiding and started civilization. This is what the Puranas say. Now, I wondered why they would suddenly come out of hiding and begin civilization, and when I began looking into that, I realized from my work in alchemy and the Cross of Henday that the big coronal mass ejection was coming soon. And then I put 2 and 2 together, and I realized that probably most of everything that's been going on for the last 6,000 years, but especially the last 70 or 80 years, is a mass evacuation by the Aryans back to Mars. And if you look at Joseph Skipper's work, I don't know if you're familiar with his work on the Hale Crater, but if you Google in Hale, H-A-L-E, Hale Crater Civilization, you can see their colony up on Mars. And Joseph was given that picture from an unknown source inside the European Space Agency, and there's farms, and there's roads, and there's buildings, and we know from Hoagland's work that Mars does not have a red sky. It actually has a blue sky, that NASA is actually purposefully coloring the sky to make it look red. Yes. We know that there's all sorts of crazy stuff all over the planet, including information I can before that happens, and so I'm on a quest right now to tell everyone what I know about what's going on in this field. And I've been working with, of course, Richard Hoagland for 20 years. I was there early on in his Moon and Mars research and traveled all over the world with him looking at stuff. But I stayed out of it because I was really only interested in the alchemical aspects of all of this. But the alchemy and the study of alchemy has led me inexorably towards trying to figure out, the bigger picture of what is going on and who is who and what is what. And in the end, I've come to some rather damning conclusions about the whole thing, and that's where I am right now. Hopefully I can get into some of that today.
Okay, great. Yeah, that would be fabulous. I see that you also have a sequel called Time Wave 2013, and I'd like to talk about that documentary that you're working on. Or I don't know, is it done at this point?
Yeah, it's done. Time Wave 2013 is out. The last film that I had that just came out is called Infinity: The Ultimate Trip, which is about life after death, which is a subversive attempt to get people to realize that there's nothing to fear, and then the controllers can't control us, which is really one of my goals right now, is to get the human race out from under the slavery and the attitude of slavery that we've been under for millennium. And right. That's really my main goal right now, is to make the human race realize that we've really been mental slaves, and it's time for us to get off our knees and start acting like people.
Or like humans. Well, yes, yeah. Absolutely. And as actually Ashiana Dean would say, angelic humans. What is, because I don't know your philosophy in terms of Black projects and where you may sort of align with Richard Hoagland. Obviously, I've interviewed him and known Richard for a while now as well, and I know some of his opinions. I know some of his background, and I think a lot of what he knows is even not out there. However, I'm wondering, are you completely aligned with him in your philosophies? Do you guys agree on most things? Do you diverge in any particular areas within, regarding what we call the big picture?
Well, I think actually Richard and I have been in very many heated discussions. I wouldn't be the only person to be in a heated discussion with Richard Hoagland. But where I diverted early on with him was he was pursuing the alien thing and thought that all of the things that we were seeing on Mars and the moon and the very odd stuff that's going on around Saturn was the extraterrestrial aliens, and I never bought that line, and so that was always our big point of disagreement. I admit that I was mistaken. I thought early on that this was all U.S. military and using the alien story as a cover-up, but I've since now, after reading the Indian Purana texts, which are the ancient texts out of India, and studying them now for a couple of years, I've come to the conclusion that there is an extraterrestrial thing going on, but that they are human. They're not human, not exactly human like we are, but they're of human stock. And
do you recognize them as being the Anunnaki? Would that be terminology which along the lines of what Sitchin writes?
Well, I do. I have many disagreements with.
Hi, this is Kerry Cassidy from Project CAMELOT, Whistleblower Radio, and I'm going to be playing a clip here to introduce our guest, Jay Weidner. One moment, please, and let's see how this works.
Jay Weidner reveals the ultimate meaning underlying the resurrection of Christ, the message of the book of Revelation, the vision of Ezekiel, and the Kabbalistic concept of the restoration of the world. While ancient lore tells us that the purpose of alchemy is to change lead into gold, this is only a metaphor for something far more important. The real point of the perennial tradition is to take the lead of the human body and convert it to the golden luminescence of the spirit, of the soul. The photons that exist inside our very DNA may be the driving force behind the alteration of our genetic structure.
Okay, this is Kerry Cassidy, Project CAMELOT, and we have Jay Weidner with us. Hopefully that clip was able to be heard over there. And I want to say that he is called by Wired Magazine an authority on Hermetic and alchemical traditions. He's a conspiracy hunter. They call him erudite, and also a modern-day Indiana Jones. Jay Weidner, I think you're well known enough where we don't even need this introduction, but I thought I would do that just for fun. Are you there?
I am. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great.
So basically, I think that you do have a very interesting body of work here, and I would love it if you would tell me where you're at now, because I think a lot of this research that you did has been in the past.
It has indeed. I've gotten into some, I guess what you call finally into the UFO field. I've been skirting the edges for 25 years and haven't really wanted to get into the UFO thing too much because there were so many other people doing it. but time is running short, and so this year, 2010, I decided that I would just come out and start telling what I knew about it, and so that's where I'm at right now. I'm trying to get out a lot of esoteric information that relates to the people or the beings that control us and control our planet, and I'm trying to get it out quickly because I'm a little bit afraid that this great window of opportunity that we've had over the last few years with the internet and the sudden explosion of information, which has just been wonderful, is going to close. And just a feeling I have, these periods of openness in history are usually very brief, and they're followed by usually a rampant kind of dictatorship. And you can go to Elizabethan England, and when Queen Elizabeth I was on the throne, and there was a sudden explosion of openness with poetry and Shakespeare and new ways of looking at religion, and alchemy came into vogue, and then it was shut down by James I soon after Elizabeth died, and so I don't know if it's going to come to a close, but I have a sneaking feeling that this window is, and so I want to get out all the information, and rivers and lakes and everything about Mars that we've been told, it isn't true. And so this is a massive cover-up of gigantic proportions, and they're using kind of the alien story as a cover to hide their activities, which I call Project Good, and good stands for Get Out of Dodge. And so they're getting out of Dodge right now. They're leaving. In fact, they may have already left. I don't know. So that's really my take.
Okay. Now, are you aware of the whistleblower testimony that we have?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. So you will know that our whistleblowers would concur that, there's definitely civilization and colony on Mars and underground bases there and so on.
Yep.
So this information, it would not be new to us, but it is new coming from the texts in India, and that's fascinating that you sort of followed that trail and got to where you are by doing so. Now, it is true. I mean, certainly the texts in India have been talking about basically UFOs, Vimanas, and so on for a long time, and people are very aware of it. It's in the literature, so to speak, in the consensus reality. But where you're going with this is interesting in that you're really focusing on Mars, and you're focusing on a particular group that came from Mars. Now, are you aware of the work of Michael Tellinger at all?
I am. I'm not. I've scanned it. I'm not completely familiar as much as I'd like to be. So, what is he saying?
Well, it's just that I just interviewed him recently, and we had also interviewed him in the summer. He's talking about South Africa, these standing stones and ruins that cover, miles and miles that basically indicate the Anunnaki civilization that Sitchin talks about, where man was possibly originally genetically engineered by the Anunnaki.
Yeah, I am familiar with that. Yeah, that's fascinating work.
Yes.
I agree that could probably be true. We were definitely, engineered by these guys, and they're seriously advanced. I mean, they may not even die, actually. Right. From what I've been able to find out. And all the things that we've heard over the years, all the fantastic things about there being an elixir of life and being able to remote view and travel across the universe. These guys do this every day. I mean, it's nothing to them. We are their slaves, and we've been their slaves for thousands of years. And they have abandoned ship because they're afraid of what's going on with the sun, as well they should be, and we all should be. And they have these underground bases on Mars because Mars does not have a magnetic field or tectonic plates, it's not going to suffer the crustal torque or the magnetic storms or any of the things that we're going to suffer when this happens. And I actually believe, by the way, that all the things that we're seeing right now, the volcanoes, the strange earthquakes, the oil pipes that are breaking, the gas clouds that are forming, this is all part of this thing that's going on, this coronal mass ejection building up on the sun is causing a commensurate electromagnetic flux here on Earth, because they're intimately related, the sun and the Earth, and we're getting all sorts of resultant